Would you please turn off your cell phones? It's been quite an evening so far. I hope you're all okay with the heat in here. We tried to cool it off. We had the drapes open and the breeze was just flowing in like crazy. But we'll have a wonderful evening anyway. And welcome to the 6th of our 2024-25 South Franklin Circle Dialogues series. Once again, our mission is to sponsor informative programs of special and timely interest for the enjoyment and edification of the South Franklin Circle residents and the community at large. This evening, we hear from another relative newcomer to Northeast Ohio, who will give us her assessment of Cleveland's Circle of Gems, all part of the celebrated University Circle Incorporated. My name is Pauline Ramey, Chair of the South Franklin Circle Residents Dialogues Committee. Committee members, please stand. The residents of South Franklin Circle always take great pleasure in welcoming guests to our Kendra Jerry Presti, President and CEO of the Music Settlement, board member of University Circle Inc., and a dialogue speaker alumni. Nancy Satula, Executive Director of South Franklin Circle. Beth Imbrescia, Vice President of the Judson Foundation. Garrick Lipscomb, way in the back, Judson Chief Information Officer. Grant Cavagna, Director of External Giving at University Circle Incorporated. Beth Cohen, Chagrin Arts Board Chair. Sean Heron with the Judson IT Department. He's back in the AV room, and once again, he's prepared to stream this evening's event to a remote audience. And then last of all, our Darlene Cash, SC Community Life Director. Applause for everyone. We could not produce these dialogues without our sponsors. Our utmost gratitude to our season sponsors, all South Franklin Circle residents. They make it possible to cover honorariums and underwrite reception costs. And now a very special thank you to this evening's sponsors. And I think due to some elevator problems, I'm not sure that George and Roma Aronoff will make it, but let's honor them anyway. Tom and Louise Brick. And Bill Conway, who couldn't make it as well this evening. Our next dialogue is April 23rd with Brad Lepper from the Ohio History Connection. And following today's presentation, we'll take a break and then move to Q&A, and I'll be ready with the mic. So especially since we have viewers in our new live streaming system, please wait for the mic, then state your name and ask your question. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome Tom Brick, a member of the University Circle Board, to the podium, who will introduce this evening's speaker.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight's speaker will bring us up to speed on where we are and where we plan to go in University Circle. Those of us who are longtime residents of the Cleveland area are very familiar with the Circle, and those of you who are new to the area will find it an amazing place to explore. University Circle is a little bit over 1 spectacular square mile, just 1 square mile. And it is home to more than 50 institutions and organizations, world-class museums, galleries, a prestigious university, and nationally recognized hospitals. It is a major economic driver in the city of Cleveland, having more than 30,000 jobs. And over the last 7 years, more than $6 billion has been invested in this 1 square mile. I'm not going to repeat Kate's resume included in tonight's dialogue announcement, but I hope you read it and you just see how active she is. As president of this diverse organization, she is responsible for the strength and growth of University Circle, including being involved in the revitalization of some surrounding neighborhoods. As a member of the UCI board, I have had the privilege of working with Kate since she took over as president, and it wasn't that long ago. She is working on updating a master plan and the mission and goals for the organization. In addition to her youth and enthusiasm, Kate brings a work history of nonprofit organizations and work in urban areas with the ability and sense of blending the two. She will work to keep this place current and vibrant and forward-thinking. It is very much my pleasure to introduce Kate Borders, President of University Circle, Incorporated.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so very much. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Everyone in the back? Wonderful. Tom didn't mention that Kendra is also on our board, and I don't think we're missing any other board members, but so I have 3 of my trustees here in the audience today, so it is an honor. And some of you have heard me speak before, so I apologize if you've heard me speak before, but I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about me so that you understand why I wanted to come here in the first place, because I've been here now for almost 2 years, and pretty much the first question people always ask me is, well, why? You know, why did you want to take on this job? So I guess I'll hit that question in the beginning so that you understand kind of my connection to University Circle, even though it wasn't known to me until I came upon the organization posting. So when I was 4 years old, my mother took me to the Nutcracker, and she believed that she would be carrying home a sleeping child in about 15 minutes. But when the last curtain call came and the dancers were bowing for the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th time, I was still white-knuckled, gripping the seat in front of me. And I looked at my mom at 4 years old, and I know this is what I said, probably because she has said it 1,000 times. And I said to her, "Are they coming back?" And my mother enrolled me in dance classes the very next day. About a year later, my grandmother saw me always tinkering on our piano, and so for Christmas, she gave me piano lessons for Christmas. So I started playing piano. My grandfather was a woodworker. He actually, by day, was an attorney, but he spent all of his evenings and weekends in a shop behind their house making stringed instruments. And he had actually gotten the plans of Stradivarius, not off the internet, but out of some library book, and he made very, very, really quality instruments. So when I entered junior high and they said you need to be in either the band or the orchestra, I asked my mother if she would take this viola that I had and go get it restrung and repaired, and I started playing the viola when I was in 7th grade. I never stopped singing walking around the house. It would drive my mother absolutely nuts. She was like, "Will you please just stop singing?" So she enrolled me in choir soon after that because she just couldn't handle that I didn't have a direction for all of this singing. So by the time I was embedded in high school, I was in ballet, performing in every single thing I could get my hands on from a ballet perspective. I was playing in the orchestra, I was singing in the choir and doing the show choir, taking private viola lessons from an instructor in Charlotte because I was growing up in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I was incredibly embedded in the arts. And my mother was a professional artist herself, Tootie. So at that point in time, she was a photographer. Growing up, she would play with clay, she would do basket weaving. There was always art happening in our house. And so that was also kind of ingrained in my upbringing, that you make things and you're active with your hands. I just gravitated to the performance piece. And my other two sisters, one was an engineer and one was an attorney. So my mom thought I was the coolest kid. I make the least money of the three of us, but it's not always the most important thing. So in college, I used to work over summers at Brevard Music Center. Has anyone heard of Brevard Music Center or been there? Okay, and Brevard Music Center, so my piano teacher in college, because I went on to major in piano performance, my piano teacher taught during the summers at Brevard Music Center. So if you're familiar with the center, it is a camp, for all intents and purposes, with a beautiful stage in the mountains in North Carolina. And kids go there from very young, to take lessons and to have a camp experience, but all focused on music, all the way up through graduate school, and they perform on a regular basis, and they do an opera a week. It is an intense performance experience if you are in grad school. I was kind of a broke college kid, so I had to work there during the summers. So I worked in the box office, I drafted the programs, I did research and did the program notes for all the different performances that were happening. And I got to kind of see the behind the scenes of the whole arts world. And one day I was walking through the grounds to go take a piano lesson because the practice rooms were in cabins, like up and down the hills, in the mountains in North Carolina. It was absolutely beautiful. If you've never been, you should go. And I was just struck by kind of the beauty of the chaos of there's some group over here that's practicing in a small little choir group, and they're kind of like rehearsing outside, and there's somebody playing the cello under a tree over here, and I can hear something coming through practice rooms in multiple different practice rooms, different instruments, all kinds of types of music is happening, jazz, some musical theater. And I just stood there, like, I love playing the piano. I love that I'm majoring in music. But at the same time, I kind of want to be doing all this and be around all this more than I want to walk into that practice room and be isolated and alone and practice for 8 hours. Now, the world takes all kinds, right? We are all grateful as aficionados, and I'm sure many of you donors of the Cleveland Orchestra and other arts organizations and performing organizations, we're grateful for those people that want to go sit in the practice room, but I had to recognize that that wasn't me. Even though I was 2 years into a degree to major in performance. And I wasn't like the best of the best. I was not like a 1%er. I probably wouldn't have gotten a contract from Sony, but I was good. I was good enough to probably have gotten a career and continue to play piano. But I wanted to be around all of it. So I went home from that summer at Brevard, and I told my mom I was giving up a full scholarship to a college that even had a stipend, and that I was going to move across the country, and that I wanted to go to the University of Arizona because I'd never been to the desert before, and I just wanted to major in music. She was like, well, you're on your own. That's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And I did. I don't know why I chose the University of Arizona. Maybe this was some weird early life crisis, I don't know. But I don't have any regrets. I did get that music degree, and in those last 2 years of finishing college, I knew that I wanted to go on and get an arts administration master's. So if you're not familiar with that degree, it's essentially a business degree like an MBA, but it's with a focus on arts management. And so you do everything from understanding payroll and the finance of the arts to the HR pieces and the organizational pieces of the arts. But it's all through that lens of nonprofit organizations. So it was a really fantastic degree for me. And going into it, I didn't really know what would come of it. You don't know when you're just starting out, right, where this path is going to take you. But as soon as I graduated, I worked for a couple of years at a grant-making foundation. Many of you are familiar with many foundations. I was at the Coleman Foundation in downtown Chicago. And that was great because it gave me the lens of philanthropy. So as a nonprofit, I knew if I was going to go into working at nonprofits, what do people need from the philanthropy perspective, right? Like when donors are doing site visits, what are they thinking about? What do they respect in organizations? And it was a really helpful couple of years. But then I got my first job as a CEO of a small art gallery and community arts center in Peoria, Illinois. I didn't really want to live in Peoria, Illinois, but they were willing to take a chance on a 25-year-old and give her this job of executive director. I stayed there for a few years, and then I got my first job in this world that we call place management, which might be a career that you're not as familiar with. So are you familiar with the career of place management? No. I'm not surprised, because for the most part, anyone that we talk to, and those of us who are in this field, we talk often about how when we go to barbecues, we don't know how to tell people what we do. But essentially, it is this world of, and I'll back up, I got into this because of the arts. Because the arts are usually connected to public art, what we think about in our spaces, in downtowns, events, when you go to festivals. All of that is coming through sort of this arts lens, and all of it is helping to develop a downtown, draw interest in urban centers. And so that kind of shifted my focus from this art world into urban place management. So I got my first job doing that in Milwaukee. How many of you have been to downtown Milwaukee? Okay, thriving downtown. Have you been to any events in downtown Milwaukee or stumbled upon? There's so many events in downtown Milwaukee. Maybe you've been to Summerfest. It is definitely a city that makes the most of summer. I think we could all agree that we understand that, being a Midwest city. So I was there for about 7 years and really kind of honed my skills on what it means to manage a place and use events to draw people to the place. So in that organization, we did a weekly concert series. It was called Jazz in the Park. It's still running I think it's been running for 35 years now. And about 10,000 people would come every week, just pouring in from the neighborhood, just walking into the event. And my first week on the job, they're like, "You're the MC. Here's a microphone." And I'm like, okay, I've never spoken to 10,000 people before, but they're not paying attention anyway, so there you go. But it was really interesting to talk to the people in the audience and pick up on, well, I moved into the neighborhood because I loved this event. Or I moved into the neighborhood because of the right housing mix that was here. And I started to think about how we develop cities, how we develop districts, what we want in a neighborhood. And I also, of course, was connected to my neighborhood partners who ran the different districts that were around there. If you're familiar with Milwaukee, you've heard of the 3rd Ward. There's an East Town and there's a West Town. And so all of those neighborhoods worked together on how to elevate the entire kind of community of Milwaukee. So it kind of helped me understand how the city thinks about place management, which is everything from that you can think of that cities do, right, to the things that the cities don't want to do, like pay for signage, wayfinding, things like that, connect the neighborhoods. Cities don't do events for the most part. So some of those things that we were doing that were making the neighborhood better were things that I was able to kind of pick up on as being really critical to the growth of the place. So I left Milwaukee and I moved to Fresno, California. Anybody been to Fresno? Okay, a couple of hands in the back. What did you think of Fresno? It had an airport. It actually has a really beautiful airport. It's funny that you say that. Fresno is really close to the sequoias, and they've mimicked sequoias in their airport. So you get to walk through these massive trees that are faux, of course, but in the middle of their airport. Fresno, downtown Fresno, was the most economically depressed urban center in the country. So highest concentration of poverty within 1 mile of downtown Fresno. And it was, I don't know if any of you followed this, but there was an era in the 1960s when we in the United States liked to close streets and make pedestrian malls. You've probably been to one. There are still many scattered around. The very first one that happened in the United States, now mind you, I'm talking about the US because in Europe, they're all over the place, right? Plazas and closed streets are all over the place. But in the United States, the very first one was Kalamazoo, Michigan. The second one ever, same designer, landscape architect, Victor Gruen, was Fresno. So in Fresno, California, they closed what was Fulton Street, turned it into Fulton Mall. Exorbitant campaign at the time to put public art throughout this entire 4-block chunk of their downtown. And at the time, it was a bustling downtown. This was 1964. But very shortly thereafter, they recognized that it was not the right plan for this mix of circumstances. So we could absolutely have a very long conversation about pedestrian malls and all of the research that has happened around them in the United States. But in this circumstance, it was not a right mix. So by the time I got to Fresno, there had already been a determination that they wanted to reopen it to traffic. So then I got to work with the federal government, Department of Transportation, and with all the city leaders to rethink opening a street to traffic that had been closed for 50 years at that point in time. So it was a really interesting time to be a part of the work that was happening in Fresno, California. Who knew? So I stayed there for a while, and then I moved to Tempe, Arizona. Who's been to Tempe? Okay. Who's been to Scottsdale? Phoenix. Maybe I'll get all of you if I hit one of those cities. If you've been to any of them, they're all sort of interconnected. So Tempe is where ASU is, which is still today the highest number of students in the country, highest enrollment, student enrollment, which is crazy. 55,000 undergrad students, not including staff or faculty or graduate or PhDs, just undergrads. So it's a massive school in the middle of Tempe. So it's a little city inside the city, right? I was in Tempe for a decade, and during that time, there was a lot of work around how do we take this, let's say, immature downtown. We were nicknamed the binge and puke downtown. Bar district, lots of bars, lots of partying right next to ASU. So to try to take something with that reputation and elevate it and kind of grow it up and turn it into an experience that we would all want to go to was really kind of a fascinating process. And I'll tell you one thing that made it easier was the gentleman who was kind of the main entrepreneur who was opening restaurants, had been opening restaurants when he was in college in his 20s. And at this point in time, he was now turning 50. So the kinds of restaurants he wanted to go to, he started making. It was kind of perfect timing. So I came along, and at the same time, the city was willing to invest in re-energizing the main street, which if you've been there is Mill Avenue. So I learned a lot about streetscapes and what it takes to turn around a street, what it takes to turn around a bar district, noise requirements, how do you make bars and restaurants be quieter. It was a really great learning opportunity for me. And it was there that I was sitting in my office, really kind of just, enjoying the work. Everything was progressing well. We had just moved offices. We were in a great new space. We'd transformed the oldest Adobe building into our offices. It's a cool, funky office. When a recruiter calls me and says, "Have you ever been to Cleveland?" And I said, "No, I've never been to Cleveland." And they said, "Well, have you ever heard of University Circle?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of University Circle." And this recruiter then continued to try to sell me on University Circle, and she didn't mention lake effect snow, any of those things. She just focused on, the weather during certain times of year and all of these arts institutions and how great it would be in the festivals in the summer and the vibrancy and the work that's happening to transition downtown. And she was talking about all the new leadership that's coming into Cleveland and all of these incredible institutions that have kind of a renewed sense of energy, and they're rethinking them. And it was a great sell. Jerry was on the search committee, so I met Jerry. She was maybe the first or second person that I met in Cleveland. It was wonderful. And I still get to work with Jerry now because she runs the music settlement. But ultimately, you can guess, I said yes. There were a couple of hiccups along the way, but eventually I moved here with my 2 daughters. And so we moved here in May of 2023. And my very first day on the job, I was supposed to start on a Monday, and the team called me and said, "Well, we know you're supposed to start on Monday at June something. I can't remember what the date was. But we have this event on Saturday, so we think you should come to this event. So we need your first aid to be at this event. And that was the day I met Kendra, because that first event was Parade the Circle. Have you been to Parade the Circle? So my very first day on the job was Parade the Circle. And at the time, we were moving our offices. We were about to renovate our offices, so they were moving out of this historic home on Magnolia Drive. I don't know if any of you have been to our offices, but we were moving out of this historic home, and we were going to be in temporary spaces for a while. So we walked through this house on that Saturday morning, and my chief of staff handed me a t-shirt and said, you'll probably never be in here again until it's renovated, but we'll see you on Monday at this other place across the street. And it was a fabulous first day. All of the institutional leaders are invited to walk in the parade. So Kendra and I, and Jerry was there that year, we all walked in the parade together, and I got to meet other institutional leaders that I would be working with. And so that was my introduction to the job of president of University Circle. And again, that was June of 2023. So today, I've been in the position for almost 2 years. Not quite, but almost 2 years. So what I'm hoping I can do now is share with you a little bit about what we've done in those almost 2 years and why I'm so excited about what's coming for University Circle. So the search committee and my board chair and all of these people related to the organization said to me in that very beginning, we need you to create a vision for where the organization is going. That was pretty clear that that was what the board wanted, right out of the gate. And I don't mean that they were pushing like today, but they wanted me to work towards where's the organization headed, what are our goals. And within the first week, I was at one of my senior staff meetings, and all of the leaders of the organization said to me, we don't know really what our purpose is. We don't really know what our goals are. We don't really have a vision. Keep in mind, a very magnanimous leader had run this organization. Maybe you all have heard of him. Anybody? Chris Ronayne. So Chris Ronayne had run this organization, but there had been a 2-year interim between Chris and my entry into the job. So in that 2-year period, you can imagine the team is feeling just this sort of angst, right? The transition has been taking quite a while. They all loved Chris. Chris was a great leader. And the interim was a great leader. Gary Hansen was an incredible leader, but Gary didn't want to push the organization or define the vision because he knew he was interim. So all these leaders had done exactly what they should have done. They were all dynamic and wonderful. And at the point I came into the organization, the team needed to have direction. So there we were. What is our purpose? What are we supposed to be doing? Who is our audience? The team would say to me things like, do we serve the institutions or do we serve the neighbors? And I'm like, why can't it be and? So we started down this process of essentially what a lot of CEOs, when they come into roles, or executive directors, say they go on a listening tour. And I agree, it is sort of a listening tour. I'm sure you've heard that many times from other leaders, but I actually think it's more of like an absorption tour. You're like really trying to let it soak in, deeply soak in. What is happening with this organization? What was the history? Why was it originally founded? If I could put myself back in the mind of Elizabeth Ring Mather and the people that she was connected to in 1967, what would she have wanted for this organization? How did she envision it moving forward almost 70 years later? So you want to absorb that history, the richness of that. You want to understand all of these institutional partners. Tom said 50 institutional partners. We also today have 7,500 residents in that 1 square mile. And then outside of that, if you go 1 mile ring, we have 75,000 residents. And yes, we have 30,000 employees in that 1 square mile, but we have 67,000 employees in a mile. So a lot of people are impacted by this place. He also mentioned Case Western Reserve University, a massive institution right in the middle of this destination. And then when you step back, all of these institutions are kind of working forward with their own agendas, rightly so, and the connectivity isn't as strong as it could be. So we started going out into the community and we asked people, every single leader, sat down with every person that we could get our hands on that runs organizations, board members, community members, students, employees, neighbors. We went to neighborhood groups, we did focus groups, and we started asking people pretty simple questions. How do you use University Circle now? How would you like it to be better? What would you fix if you could fix something about University Circle? And the answers were actually pretty, I think there's data around this that you get to a certain point, like 7 or 8 questions or interviews, and you start to see some themes rising, right? If you do enough of these, it becomes pretty clear quickly what you need to be doing. So what we learned very early on was that not only did we not have a vision as a team and as an organization, but nobody knew what we did. So people that we were talking to couldn't explain what we did. So we weren't communicating accurately the work of the organization. People knew University Circle as a place, but they didn't really understand our organization. So we knew we had some work to do to define, once we defined it for ourselves, we needed to define for everybody outside of our organization what it was that we did and what our goals were. But we heard from a lot of people that they just loved the beauty. So when we would ask ourselves, what do we need to keep? It's the beauty. It's the serenity of the place. It's going for a walk and being able to walk around the lagoon. And if I were to ask you all right now, what do you love about University Circle today? I would bet that many of you would say something around beauty, the lagoon, the walkability, the green space. Would you have said something like that? Yep. Yes. Would you say something about, I love going to the institutions? Something like that. So we knew what was positive, but then we would hear from a lot of people, mainly people in adjacent neighborhoods, that they didn't feel like they were welcome. They didn't feel like this was a space they belonged in. And that goes beyond just us inviting them, right? Like you can invite people to come to something, but if they don't feel like this is a place where they can truly walk through the door and be accepted, well, that's a different conversation. So we started hearing this theme rise to the top. There are some things we need to keep and care for and kind of nurture in this physical place, but we also need to start to figure out a better way to connect to our neighbors. And then we started hearing people say things like, we don't think that the marketing, that the communication, that the strategy around how you are messaging this place is very good. So a lot of our institutional partners would say to us, we're marketing the art museum, let's say, or we're marketing the orchestra, but we think it's your job to market all of this and the connection between Judson and the music settlement and the art museum and the orchestra. Who's doing that? Who's telling that collective story? So as we kept listening to all of this and kind of honing in on what we thought we were hearing from all of our stakeholders, we then did these workshops, and we brought everyone back into our offices. We did, I think, 5 of them, and we had kind of examples of here's what we think we heard that you want to see in University Circle, and we let people kind of then comment on what we had absorbed and if we were on the right track. And out of that, we came up with what we're calling our action plan. We didn't think that it was time to do a strategic plan because strategic plans are very long range, and we wanted something that was very actionable right now. So what do we need to do right now to get us on the right track? And I just kind of outlined for you what our main pillars were. So our main pillars were 1, people. How do we connect people to the circle, both people that work in the circle already and people that are neighbors that need to come into the circle and don't feel like they have that access? How do we work with those people to feel like they belong in University Circle so that you feel like you belong, our next door neighbors feel like they belong, and everyone in between? People. Our second pillar was absolutely, it is our job to steward the place. We heard that over and over again. The place matters. It is beautiful, it is serene, but there are parts of it that aren't as accessible physically. Anybody ever gotten lost in University Circle? Anybody ever thought these roads are a mess? Or if you are walking, maybe you don't know which way to go because it's just not really that clear where you should go. So kind of the navigation of it isn't ideal right now, even though, yes, beautiful, serene, things that we need to preserve, but some things that we could fix and work on, right? And it's our job to nurture that place. It is not Jerry's job, running the music settlement, to go out and try to repair potholes, right? But she's got a lot of potholes on Magnolia Drive, and they drive her nuts. So it is our job, it is our team's job to work with the city, to advocate, to understand when their budget cycle is, to call our elected officials, to tell them what streets we want to prioritize over the next 5 years to repair those potholes, and then to stay on them about what they're going to do. Magnolia Drive is next, because we've been working on that one for a very long time. But that work is very behind the scenes. People don't know that's happening, and yet if it didn't happen, those streets wouldn't be repaved. The road around Wade Oval that goes in front of the Art Museum was just repaved last year because we're on the phone constantly. So we care for the place, and that is our job. And then the third pillar is story. So if we're not telling the story accurately, then we're not going to be promoting the place, University Circle, to our audiences that might be very far away. Think about the power that this place could have if we were really tapping into the visitor market. If we were really bringing people in from as far, like from all of Northeast Ohio, maybe the whole state. I challenge you to think of a place like University Circle anywhere else in the country with 50 institutions, as Tom said, in 1 square mile. Anybody? No, there isn't one. I feel bad because I keep dancing around you. But yes.
Trafalgar Square.
Okay. You're coming close. Yes. So there are places that definitely have institutions and that have amazing arts and culture, but I still argue that University Circle has a quantity and a caliber that we don't see anywhere else. So if we're not telling that story and like screaming it from the rooftops, then we're not doing our job correctly. So that's what we heard. And I will say always, underlying all of that for any nonprofit and any organization is you have to be stable, you have to have good finances, you have to have a good CFO, you have to understand the workings of your organization. So I'm not mentioning that because it's the foundation that I want you all to know that we also value and are working towards making sure that that is always top of mind. But what's public viewing are those 3 pillars. How do we connect with the people and create programs for the people? How do we support the place, and how do we tell the story? So that's what we found out after that year of research. That was sort of our charge. So now what have we done since then? It's been about 6 months since we finished that action plan work. And so we have kind of major programs that we're now executing under each of those 3 pillars. So the first that Tom mentioned for the place is the Public Realm Master Plan. Anybody ever done a public realm master plan or been a part of a planning company? I know that you all have had incredible careers and done wonderful things. Anybody ever done any urban planning? Landscape architecture? No? I'm surprised. I thought there'd be one of you in here. Y'all are whispering. So a master plan is, we're now working with consultants out of Boston who are working with us for the entire year of 2025. And essentially they're going to assess all of University Circle from a physical perspective. And they're going to give us recommendations on how to improve everything from the minute that you drive in. So what do the entryways look like when you're approaching University Circle? What does the access look like once you're in University Circle? How do you drive through? How do you walk through? How do you bike through? Do we have appropriate lanes for all of those things? Do we have good sidewalks once you're in University Circle? How do students walk from the Cleveland School of the Arts to cross the street? What does all of that look like? We have residents who live in facilities that are in scooters, a lot of them. How do they navigate getting around the urban center? Are the lights long enough for them to cross the street safely? Thinking through every single one of those details. Do people have adequate signage to go from point A to point B? Is there shade where you need shade? Are there plants where you need plants? Do we have enough trees? How is our tree canopy? Everything you can imagine about the physical realm we're going to have guidance on from these external landscape architects and transportation experts who will give us kind of a plan that will take probably 20 years to execute on. It's not like it's going to be, oh, these are all the things that we think you should do and go do them all today. It's going to be now you have material to share with your stakeholders that this is your roadmap, no pun intended, for where you are going over the next 20 years. So it takes a ton of work to do this kind of thing because it also is not something we're going to do in a vacuum. We're not going to do it without input. We will be letting you know. I'm hoping that I can send this through you to inform you when we'll have opportunities for the community to come and speak to us about what you want in University Circle, how you drive there or walk there, or what you experience, or if there are areas where you just feel like this isn't pretty, can you put some public art in this corner? I mean, however you feel about the place, we want to know. So that's something we're going to be doing over the next year. And we are engaging the entire community. So we have an engagement partner that is a company called Third Space Action Lab that is based in Glenville. And we also have a transportation partner, and we have a parking study partner that will be looking at parking. Because that is the first question on everyone's mind is parking. So that is some of the biggest kind of work that we're doing under place. And at the same time, we're doing all of the other things that we have historically done, hopefully better, always constantly better. For example, does everyone know that we have our own police department? Louise knows. So of course, safety is a huge piece of place, right? If you don't feel safe, that's sort of on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's kind of the bottom. If we can't achieve that for you, you're not going to come back. You're not going to care about the pretty artwork that we end up installing or the beautiful public art or the shade structures if you don't feel safe. So safety is a critical component, and that will be something that we will always focus on. And there are other elements of place. I mean, everything like I've talked about with the advocacy, how do we ensure that the things that need to just be maintained are being maintained? Because if they aren't, that's also going to be a problem. If you come in and there's a big, huge crater in the middle of a street and you can't even drive down the road because it's terrible to even be there, you're not going to want to be there. If the entryways are really terrible and make you feel like you're not entering a significant place, it's not going to make you want to come back. Another challenge that we have are the bridges. Anybody drive in through the bridges? Yeah. If you drive from University Circle into East Cleveland, there is a bridge there that I've never felt unsafe, but I don't want to walk under that bridge. It is not pleasant at all. So definitely something that we need to address and figure out a solution for. So that's the place. Then when it comes to the people, I told you that I spent a lot of time, all of our team spent a lot of time even absorbing our founding documents, going back to the original plan from 1957. It actually was another firm that's no longer in existence, a planning firm out of Boston. But that work spoke regularly throughout the entire planning document about how critical it was that we connected to our neighbors. Spoke specifically about neighborhoods in our founding documents. Called out neighborhood engagement as being something that would always be the work that this organization needs to do. And it's not that we had stopped doing that. It's not that it wasn't a priority. It's just that it had been maybe not top of mind. So we hired an engagement officer who now works with all of our neighbors. And in our renovation of our home, we turned the old carriage house into a community room. And we now do community programming that is in response to what the neighborhood told us they wanted. So, for example, we asked them, do you want social activities, or do you want to learn things, or do you want clubs, or what do you need from a neighborhood partner like us? And we got a great deal of feedback. And so this week, we launched our first ever mask making workshop, where we're doing arts and crafts with neighbors, and they're able to make masks in the style of our artists in residence. And just yesterday, we had our first ever literary workshop, where we brought a literary artist in to work with community members, and they're writing poetry, and they're learning kind of writing skills, and they're going to be working together for 5 or 6 sessions. And this is just the beginning of the series that we're doing. We're partnering with PNC, and we're doing financial readiness, kind of an awareness program where they can come in and ask questions about their finances. So we're launching that program right away. And then we're bringing our police into the mix and having them do trainings with neighbors. We're also focusing heavily on trainings with police officers with teenagers. How many of you have grandkids that are teenagers? Okay. I have a daughter who's a teenager. And so we've got our police officers going into high schools and teaching kids what they should expect if they're pulled over. What their rights are, what the police officer's rights are, what do they do if they feel like something wasn't right in this interaction. Those are important things for kids to know as they're starting to drive. But our police officers are breaking down the barriers between community and being the source of that information, because that elevates people and connection to people. So that's some of the work we're doing inside of people. And then when it comes to story, how many of you had marketing careers? Anybody have a career in marketing? Okay, we've got some marketing people. So when it comes to story, we are doing a rebrand right now, which sounds on the surface like that means we're just trying to replace our logo, but that is not what it means. Yes, ultimately we likely will replace our logo, but it also means that we want to understand our brand promise. We want to understand how people perceive our brand. We want to understand how people are receiving communication from us, both locally. How do you all hear from us? How do you get your news? How do you find out about events and things that you go to? And then nationally, how do we increase visitation? How do we speak and communicate to a broader audience effectively and strategically? And so we're doing this rebrand so that we can now have a communication strategy that will increase people coming into the circle. And the more people we get coming into the circle as a whole place, and hopefully doing more than one activity, the more people want to live here. Remember I told you in Milwaukee that people would come to our concert series and say, I moved here because of the concert series? Remember how I told you in Tempe that we were redoing the streetscape and all the businesses were thrilled, and they were thinking about then ways that they would improve their businesses because the city was investing in the infrastructure. So all of these pieces play into making a place thrive. It increases residential activity, it increases business activity, and it makes the place more special. So that's the work that we're trying to do right now. And because a lot of people don't know, the way we are funded is, there are multiple tiers, but one way is through what's called a special improvement district. So we have essentially property owners in university circles see an assessment on their taxes that is for the work that we do, and that money pays for our police department. Almost one-to-one. Actually, our organization subsidizes it a little bit because it doesn't quite cover the cost of the police department. So the tax that we receive from our property owners, and if you really think about this, it's kind of crazy that our property owners are paying for police services, because those should be, usually, we assume those are municipal services, right? But they're getting a service above and beyond what the city provides. So our tax base pays for our police services. We then fundraise. We have an endowment, so of course we have some proceeds from the endowment. And then we have historically been a land bank. So as we are moving away from that, we still have some residual income from long-term land leases. So those are kind of the four stools of our financial foundation. So I say that because I think often people want to understand, like, where's this money coming from? You know, what do you do? How are you going to pay for new streets? How are you going to pay for, if this master plan reveals that you need a plan to improve Wade Oval, let's say hypothetically. How many of you have been to Wade Oval for an event? I think it's probably in need of a refresh. But that will then be a campaign that we will undertake that will be specific to that work. Once we have a design that we can show to people, that will be a separate work product that we will move forward with. So that's sort of where we've been, how we got here, how we received information and feedback, what we're planning on doing moving forward, and we will forever check in from a feedback perspective. So the goal is, here's where we are now. We're doing this work that will inform, hopefully, lots of other work to come. But then we'll take that and we'll go back to the community and say, are we on the right track? Are we doing the right things? How do you feel about this? Because ultimately, I want University Circle to be your living room. I want you to want to come there. I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel like you're going to have a wonderful experience. I want you to love being there. I want you to have easy access. I don't want you to be confused by the roads or by not having good signage. I don't want you to get stuck in a pothole. I want you to love the orchestra. I want you to have great opportunities of restaurants to go to, not just one. I want you to have an amazing experience. And all of that takes a thriving community that is definitely reinvested in by an organization like ours. So I hope that just threaded it all together for you, and I'm absolutely happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful rendition of what's going on
Thank you.
at the Circle. Remember to state your name and then ask your question.
How was my timing?
Trevor Jones, that was a wonderful presentation.
Thank
With
you.
all your future plans, what is your annual budget?
10 million.
Is that enough?
No.
How much do you need?
You know, what would my dream budget be? I mean, actually, it's not, like, for example, Wade Oval Wednesdays cost about $20,000 per night. It's a free concert, right? I wish that we could do concerts like that all year long, well, during the good weather. So I would love for us to have a robust budget to do free programming on a regular basis. Because I believe more people, more eyes on the street, increases safety, increases visibility, increases people going into the restaurants, everything goes up. So, you know, 11 million would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm Tony Oliverio. The question is, roughly what are the physical boundaries that you consider to be University Circle?
That is a great question. And if I had done slides, probably the main one would have been the map. But to the north, it's Wade Park. So neighborhood-wise, Glenville. To the east, it is East Cleveland. And then Cleveland Heights. Yep, Cleveland Heights is our Little Italy going up into Cleveland Heights. Is it by Mount Carmel, Jerry?
Ambleside is the, right by Judson Park.
Yeah, so your other Judson is kind of that southeastern corner. And then East 105th on this side, and kind of like Chester curves around Carnegie, that area on the south side.
Okay.
So Cleveland Clinic technically is not in our district. Yeah, so Cleveland Clinic is just outside of the district. University Hospitals is in the district. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is John Wilhelm. I would like to thank you very much for that very enlightening story that you told us. I've lived in Cleveland all my life. In fact, our 1957 high school class in Lyndhurst went to graduation at Severance Hall.
That's wonderful.
It's always amazing to me that Cleveland always gets a second or third rate standing whenever you look at any kind of a rating of all the great cities, when in fact the facility that we have down at University Circle is just number one. We have a tremendous orchestra and all the stuff that you were talking about.
Yep.
I don't know what you do about it. It's just an observation, but I can't tell you how much we enjoy that area down there, and wish you the best of luck in continuing to broaden its horizon and keep things where they're going.
Thank
Very well
you.
done. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a concerted marketing effort, right? That is changing the narrative around it. You know, you're right. It gets a bad rep.
Who was next?
She's got one person right there, and then.
Hi, Mike Weissman. Do you cooperate with Rock and Roll and Playhouse Square to promote the area to bring more people from outside into Cleveland area?
Yeah, so Craig Hassel arrived here a year before I did, who runs Playhouse Square. I don't know if Craig has come and presented to you all. Last month? Okay, great. So Craig and I are having conversations right now about how we could partner. Our institutions are partnering already. And Greg Harris was probably, I think I met Greg before I met you because he was on my initial tour. Greg and I definitely are talking about, we've already done a cross exchange with our teams because a lot of times that work happens at the staff level. So our marketing departments are starting to work together for all of those organizations, which I think is really critical for them to be thinking about programmatically how we can work together. But yeah, all of them, including all of the organizations in the circle.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Dot Bamback. I'm a resident here at South Franklin Circle. I am not from this area. I have finally figured out how to drive back and forth to the clinic and the Museum of Natural History and the Art Museum. But in all your discussion about your opportunities and your challenges and your future plans, I never heard the words public transportation. What goes on with that, and are you stuck with what you've got, or is it untouchable?
I would not say that we are stuck with what we have got. We actually do have a transportation planner on our team, and so he is constantly looking at how do people access the circle in every way, shape, or form. We have a shuttle, which is not what you're talking about, but we do have a shuttle right now, and we are working with RTA to look at what their expansion looks like. Being that we are not, part of RTA, like our role there is again advocacy, and it's understanding, and it's kind of helping to generate the need. Most public transportation extensions of things that are substantial, like a light rail or like a streetcar, things like that I think would be really critical. I agree with, I can't get from my house in Shaker Heights to University Circle on the light rail. I could get downtown, so I could go downtown and then go back to University Circle, but who's gonna do that, right? But that type of, so the way data is measured, as many of you I'm sure probably know because you're incredibly brilliant, is how many people are getting on and off, boarding, and I think they call it alighting or whatever, at various stops. So as the density of the people coming and going from that closest stop, which is right there in Little Italy and University Circle, as that increases, then they will continue to consider expanding the rail lines. But that is something that we monitor and that we are advocating for.
Next question.
Sandy Waldman.
Really good questions.
I live in Judson Park, which is right there at University Circle. One of the reasons I moved there was to be close to all the institutions.
Okay.
Which is a marvelous thing. I was wondering about Lakeview Cemetery. You talked about having a very interesting experience. I don't know how you think about Lakeview Cemetery. It's very close, but it's on the other side of that bridge, isn't it?
So that is a great question. So we do consider Lakeview Cemetery to be in University Circle. That bridge that is unpleasant is unpleasant. I'll stick with that for now. But Lakeview is one of our member institutions, as well as the Sculpture Center, if you've ever been to the Sculpture Center, and the Artists Archives, which are both in that building, which is right next to Lakeview, which was the foundry for all of the big statues that happened in Lakeview. So we work with, Kathy is on our board, she's fantastic. Grace and Mindy are also on our board who run those two. So all three of those institutions, as well as the centers, if you've ever been over to the centers, those are 4 institutions that we have that are right there outside of that bridge, but still in University Circle. So we do meet with them regularly, and we are having lots of conversations. We attempted to get one of the transformative arts grants to improve the bridge. We were unsuccessful, but we're not going to stop. We're talking constantly about improving that bridge. And I don't know if any of you know about the development that's happening in East Cleveland through the Cuyahoga Land Bank. Has anybody heard about this? I see some heads shaking. Yeah. So that project is bringing, gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head, 40 units. Anybody know? Something like that. A decent number of units right there past Lakeview Cemetery, butted up to Lakeview Cemetery. The Cuyahoga Land Bank is improving all of these parcels. I believe they bought 40 parcels. And so they're now advocating with us to improve the bridge because they want those residents to be able to access University Circle. So we're getting some mass in this fight that we're going to have to take to the railroad. It's difficult to access the railroad.
Okay.
Anybody know anybody that works on the railroad?
We're just about out of time, but you can catch up with her at the reception, but there's time for one more. George.
Hi. Congratulations again on your report. It was outstanding. My name is George Arnoff, and I speak about some of my experiences in the time I spent at Case Reserve, because I went to undergraduate school there and law school. So I spent a good deal of time there, and obviously a lot of time around University Circle. Having said that, a couple of comments and items that you might be helpful. Number one, when I was on the board at Case Reserve, we did a 20-year master plan, which included access to Wade Oval, to the museum, and if you haven't used that, seen it, I highly recommend that that's something that you should explore, because a lot of time and effort and very interesting findings came out of that study, and that happened while I was on the board of Case Reserve. Excuse me. So that's point number one. Point number two, safety is something we had a number of issues with, and the university is obviously then and now one of the real stakeholders when you talk about University Circle. And among other things, you have a built-in audience there with the students at Case Reserve. So that's, I think, a audience which you can take advantage of in terms of your planning and structuring. The one comment I would make about the safety issue, which we ran into during the time I was active at the board, is the police and police units. And I don't know if the structure is the same now as it was 20 years ago, but the police safety force structure of University Circle and that of Reserve and the Cleveland Police Department were very important components in terms of the total safety aspect of that whole area. And I can tell you from events that took place while I was there and spending a lot of time there, worked together sometimes. And one of the, issues that we confronted were various incidents that occurred there which should not have occurred if they had a better safety program. So, yeah, okay, so my last comment is that's something that if you're not, if in terms of focusing on safety, that collaboration is very important. Thank you.
Okay, so he asked about the master plan and if we were acknowledging the other master plans that have happened in the past, particularly of Case. And so 100%. So Case is actually going through another master plan right now. They have a different consultant on board. And their most recent master plan before that was, I'm thinking, 4 or 5 years ago, their physical master plan. And so what our consultants are doing is going and doing one-on-ones with all of our institutional partners that have their own master plans, because let's take the art museum. They're looking at their land and the lagoon, but they're not going to plan for the sidewalks after you get out of their land, right? So then our master plan will speak to how these places connect. And so we are working with Case and all of our partners. That's a great example. And then the police thing, so Chief Owen and Chief Wetzel, my chief, are buddies. They get together on a regular basis along with other chiefs that are influencing the area, and all the security administrators, the security at the art museum, the security at every facility. They have regular meetings. They do regular trainings that are regional and local. And the collaboration is, And people say this all the time, and really they mean collaboration. I am telling you, we are collaborating in a way that, Jerry's nodding her head, and Kendra knows. I mean, we really do work closely together, because you are right. We're all in the same space, and if we're not doing this together, it's worthless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know we've had enough questions. We could go for another half an hour at least. But the reception awaits us. And thank you so much, Kate, for
That was
your
a pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the reception for the next hour.